Everyone at my wedding believed my father walked me down the aisle. I had paid him by the hour. My real father left when I was 6. The man who walked me down the aisle I found through an app that rents out background actors for events. His profile said, weddings, funerals, corporate mixers. Can cry on cue. I messaged him and asked if he did father of the bride. He replied, 40 an hour, 2-hour minimum, I bring my own suit. His name was Gerald. We met at a coffee shop 3 weeks before the wedding so he could learn me. What did I do when you were little? He asked, pen out. I said, you taught me to ride a bike. He wrote it down. Good. I'll say I ran behind you the whole time and let go without telling you. I stared at him. That's exactly what a dad would say. He nodded. That's the job. The reason I needed him was my fiance's family. The Aldridges were the kind of people who asked what your father did before they asked your name. Bennett, my fiance, never knew my dad was gone. I told him early, when I was still trying to impress, that my father was a retired engineer who traveled a lot. It was easier than the truth. Then the wedding came, and the lie needed a face. Gerald was perfect. At the rehearsal dinner, he shook Bennett's father's hand and said, so you're the man who raised the boy stealing my daughter. The table laughed. Bennett's mother dabbed her eyes. I sat there watching a stranger perform my father better than my father ever had. The morning of, Gerald adjusted my veil in the bridal suite. You look like your mother, he said softly. I never met your mother. I laughed and it came out shaky. He squeezed my hand. That one was free. He walked me down the aisle at 4 p.m. He didn't rush. At the altar he lifted my veil, kissed my forehead and whispered, whoever your real one was, he was a fool. Then he shook Bennett's hand and sat in the front row like he belonged there. I made it through the vows because he kept nodding at me like a lighthouse. The reception was where it should have ended. Gerald's 2 hours were up at 7 p.m. I'd already Venmo'd him with a tip. He found me by the cake and said, I'm heading out. This was a good one. I hugged him and meant it. Then Bennett's mother Diane appeared. You're not leaving before the father-daughter dance? Gerald's face didn't move. Wouldn't dream of it, but my back's acting up. Diane smiled the way she smiled before she ruined things. Funny, because I called the Wentworth Engineering Alumni Association last week to surprise you both with a plaque. She turned to me. They have no record of a Gerald anything. So I did some looking. The music was still playing. Bennett walked over, confused. Mom, what's going on? Diane pulled out her phone and held up a screenshot. It was Gerald's profile, the rental app. Can cry on cue, she read aloud. 2-hour minimum. She looked at me like she'd finally caught the thing she always suspected I was. Your bride hired her own father. I want everyone to hear how she started this marriage. She turned to face the room and lifted her champagne glass to make it loud. And that was when Gerald stepped forward and put his hand over the top of her glass. Diane, he said, calm as anything. Before you toast, you should know I kept every message. He held up his own phone, including the one you sent me. Tuesday, 11 p.m. The room went quiet. Bennett looked at his mother. What message? Gerald read it out, flat and clear. This is Diane Aldridge. I understand you're being hired for Saturday. I'll pay you double your rate if during the father-daughter dance, you announce to the room what you really are. I want it public. I want my son to see who he married. He lowered the phone. I said no. Then I raised your daughter-in-law's rate to 0 and worked the day for free. Because in 30 years of pretending to be people's fathers, nobody ever asked me to gut a bride at her own wedding. And I wasn't going to start for you. Diane's glass was still in her hand. Bennett took it from her, set it down, and turned to me. Is this true? All of it? I didn't answer. Gerald did. The part that's true, he said, is that she cried in that coffee shop when she realized she had to pay a stranger to walk her down the aisle because the man who was supposed to didn't want the job. That part's real. The rest was mine to fix. Bennett looked at his mother for a long moment. Then he took my hand and said to the whole room, everyone, I'd like you to meet Gerald, the only father in this family worth the name. And Diane finally set down her empty glass because there was nothing left in it to raise.